Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Hi everyone, as you can see, we're outdoors and we're actually in the same space at the same time through some lucky happenstance, shall we say that? Yeah.
Well, that's right. It's particularly amazing considering obviously the global COVID situation, but I guess here in Australia now we've got a little bit of travel between the states, and when you get the chance, you've got to make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But good to see you over in Melbourne, Steve. I think this has been 10 years since the last episode that we did in Melbourne.
It would be.
And you know, we get to do it in the outdoors. As you can see, I'll take some more video a bit later, just to show where you were, but where we are at the moment. But you can probably see from the backgrounds, I've got the ultra wides going, so you can see what we've got. I've got two cameras. It's the whole mobile setup that we've got here going.
It is. And I don't remember how we did the last shot in Melbourne, but certainly wasn't like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
The technology just wasn't there.
I believe it was indoors, and all connected to power, as I remember. Hopefully this will turn out well. It's a bit of an impromptu setup. We've got some wind and stuff, but you know, I've got the Old Faithful. I've cranked it out for this special occasion. Haven't used it for a while, but and doing a bit of vox popping type stuff here.
Tried and tested technology. You know, you've got to keep it in. Got to keep it on. You know.
Absolutely.
In the mix.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to, for the bulk of this episode, we're going to talk about, I guess, what Apple products to buy in early 2022. So we're actually going to do it. We've got a screen record of an iPad going so that we can sort of talk our way through this. But before we get into that, just did want to touch on one story, which was the whole Neil Young, Joe Rogan saga that blew up in the past week. And obviously, a lot's been said about it. You know, Neil Young taking a stance, you know, against what he saw as misinformation on the platform, and you know, basically, like, he didn't really have a chance, really, because Spotify just said, "Yeah, no, we'll go with Joe, thanks."
That's it. You got to pick your fights, Neil. Like,
I just felt it. Like, I mean, there's so much you can talk about the ideological part of it, but for me, it was such a cynical business move in the sense of, if you think of that art versus commerce thing, it was really just Neil Young's got 6 million listeners, Joe's got 200 million. How do the numbers work out?
Well, I just don't know how Neil never saw it as just pissing in the wind, basically. Like, it's just, there was no way his opinion was going to matter.
Yeah, well, and plus too, I mean, fair enough. He's probably got like some sort of, you know, he's taking a stand for himself, and he's got like that. I think he had that history of supporting vaccines because he had polio or something like that in the past. So I can definitely understand for grounds like that he'd be objecting. But at the same time, knowing how this business works, the key thing I think will be to see what happens from this. Now, obviously, Spotify's not hurting from a money point of view, because I'm sure they're generating heaps of ad revenue through a long form podcast that's going out to 200 million listeners every week. But what happens if this leads to anyone else boycotting the platform, or even just a general backlash in general against Spotify?
I mean, I get it if it's a commercial decision, but this is, I guess, an ethical decision. And Spotify doesn't make the product that Neil's rebelling against; it just streams it. So, you know, you're going to be, unless you've got 200 million listeners, like you say, you're never going to have a shot.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the fun stuff now. I'm just going to do this live. Hopefully this works. Just chuck the screen record on now. So I'm going to overlay this amongst the footage. I've got two cameras and a screen recorder. I've got three cameers to work with here in the edit. This is going to be a big edit for me.
I've never seen anything like this before.
Alrighty, so we're at the beginning of 2022. Apple's still got a whole year of products to announce, and I actually think, just at the outset, I think we might revisit this at the end of the year and do something similar after they've released everything they do this year, to see if it actually changes anything in terms of what we would probably go and pick ourselves and what we'd maybe recommend.
Well, it's good. I'm back to Apple in 2021, so by the end of this year, it'll be 1 year of being back at Apple. So it's been an interesting experience over the last 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're thinking of doing here is starting off with what would be arguably the most necessary of the Apple products. It's a first world problem thing. I don't think these things are necessary in that sense, but I guess if you're functioning in the world and you need a tech device to use, when you think of the primary computing device, it's definitely a smartphone now, which obviously leads us to the iPhone, as you can see here. Now, you look at this and the irony, of course, is that, yes, it's complicated by Apple standards, but if you were to look elsewhere, there's like 10 million other options that you could pick. So from Android devices, etc., you could get really lost in this. I do want to start out by saying that this is a stark contrast to, say, when I started with the iPhone back in 2010. Basically, there was one option, the iPhone 4. There was only one color, and the only options you had were storage. So it was very simple. And the other thing that I also would suggest is that, yes, in the current lineup, as you can see here, there's like previous models that they're offering, but there was a previous model that year, the 3GS, but the year-on-year upgrade was so massive that you realistically wouldn't be going for the previous year's model unless you were really wanting to save cash. So, whereas what we're looking at here, and this is the point we want to start out with the 13 lineup, is that all of these are really capable. All of these will probably last 5 years if you bought them today. So where do you begin, and how do you know what to pick, especially if you're not as discerning about specific features or whatever it is that you want to do? Maybe I'll start with you, Steve. I know you jumped in with your selection. So what did you get, and what did you why was the selection?
Well, if we're looking at phones, I've gone with an iPhone 13 in 2021. Look, overall, it's a fantastic phone, and I'm really very happy with it. But I thought there's a few things that I would have thought that Apple could have got right. Maybe they couldn't. One is the weight. It is heavy. Okay, it's heavy. Size isn't the issue, but the weight is. The other thing is there's no LED notification button or charge button. And then probably the third thing is that we've got, what's that thing called?
Oh, the lightning port.
The lightning port, not a USB-C. And when you get a MacBook Pro these days, it's got USB-C.
Yep.
So...
And iPads as well.
And iPads as well. So for me, they're probably three things that you'd say maybe on their own would each be trivial. But, and there's a fourth, which is no fingerprint sensor to open. Have to go with a facial. So if you don't mind that stuff, you're going to love this phone because it's got a great camera, and I have to say the way it integrates in a daily workflow is spectacular. But I find those four things just on a day-to-day basis functionally annoying.
Absolutely, yeah. But would you say it's sort of like a good mid-tier, well, not mid-tier, mid-tier for the top end of the range?
Jeez, you give Tim Cook a heart attack. Look, I think if you're that way inclined for a big, heavy phone, you might as well go the Pro. If you wanted a lighter weight phone that was probably more reasonably priced, maybe the Mini. I mean, it's strange. And now I'm not trying to knock this phone at the moment. I've just knocked it on the four things that I hate. But it is stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
It is stuck in the middle. I think potentially for most people, the Mini or the Pro would probably be more appropriate.
Indeed, I might actually speak to that a little bit. I'm a bit complicated because I've actually got this kind of thing going on at the moment where my main phone is on a 2-year cadence, but I've also been now starting to buy a secondary phone to be a second camera, because obviously we've got two cameras. We need this setup, So I actually picked up the 13 Mini this year in the sort of as the second device. It's not the primary device that I use. I actually It's funny. It makes me feel like it's like the iPhone 4 because of the size, but you're getting the fact that it's virtually all screen. Yeah. It's nice having that sort of one-handed feel to it, which is ironic because my main phone is actually the 12 Pro Max, which is like nice and big, and I do that because I primarily use it as a computing device.
You picked up 0.5, and it doesn't have a left hand or right hand keypad.
Oh yeah, of course. When it's got a screen that big.
When it's got a screen that big. So there's number 5. Anyway, nitpicking, but they all add up.
Yeah, absolutely. But like for me, it's quite suitable for that secondary camera that I need it for this sort of purpose. Obviously, I wouldn't buy a second phone if I wasn't using it for this reason. I did have an iPhone 11 before. We'll talk about that in a minute. And I actually found this Mini is actually really good. It's not my choice because it's too small for using it as a primary computing device. Yeah. But if you were a, say, casual user who would actually use it more like a phone, it's actually a great option. It also happens to be the cheapest option of the high end. So it's well recommended, and plus they improved the battery life compared to last year. So it's a good thing. But yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just going to add to that. Sadly, this adds to my work life. Yeah. It probably doesn't integrate that well with my leisure life.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the real issue with it.
Absolutely. So there you go. So I'm sort of going 12 Pro Max primary phone for everyday use, and I've got the 13 Mini for the secondary camera and a couple of other things.
The Mini's a very good looking phone.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Now, I did just want to touch quickly on some of the other models because you're wondering, well, there's still other phones, and you said they're all capable, which they are. I'd say that the SE is actually great as I'd hesitate to call it a budget option. I mean, it's still in Australian dollars, $679, so that's not cheap, but considering the functionality, that's actually really, really good value. And you'll get, 5 years out of it as well, probably.
Oh, look, it's a sensational phone, as you said. As long as what you're doing with it is not screen-oriented, or you've got glasses, it'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I referred to the 11 before. I actually think the 11 is actually a decent pick as well, more along the lines of the SE rather than the higher end, mainly because it's the SE but with the newer tech. So the Face ID, dual camera system, but at a lower price, so down at $849, starting at $849. The other thing that I did want to mention is that the 12 is probably the one I wouldn't recommend for anybody at this point, because you might as well just go the 13 at this point. And I do want to mention this because, hopefully this will work here, assuming. So unless you want a purple phone in this shade, because that's the only iPhone that has that color.
Supply chain issues.
Absolutely. But if we were to pick the iPhone 12, for instance, and I'll just go through this now. The base model iPhone 13 starts at 128 gigs, so the proper comparison is to actually pick that storage option. That's $1279. If you now go to the 13, pick the blue one, that's $1349. So $1279 versus $1349. I think that's a no-brainer. Yes, you're saving what, $70.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a good option.
I think, as you said to me, which I didn't listen, start off at least at 256. It won't make the phone weigh anymore, even if you fill it up.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's what I would think. I think like if you can, just get one of the 13 lineup. Yeah. Otherwise, the SE or the 11, I think, is what you would go for. I'm sure that they're selling 12s by a rate of knots, but at the same time, I just don't know. It's a curious entry in the lineup. At least they've got I guess they're hitting a price point, and that's all it is.
Look, I guess so, and I think one of the stronger things, though, I would say about the iPhone 13 is, okay, there's that extra weight, but you do get the battery life. So I've heard the 12 burns its battery pretty quick, so that would be another reason to go for the 13.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's have a look at some of the other products here. I would actually say that the Mac is probably the next most necessary thing if you were going to get something. And again, you've got lots of options, but I'm going to keep this simple.
Yeah.
I actually you've got plenty of options there. MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, the 24-inch iMac, the 27-inch iMac, the Mac Pro, the Mac Mini. Smorgasbord of options there. However, the only one that would probably hit 95% of users is the MacBook Air.
Yep.
It also happens to be, the Mac Mini's cheaper, but you'd need to get a monitor and a keyboard, etc. for that. But the MacBook Air is the cheapest option, but with the M1 chip, it's really, and the battery life and everything you get, it's really the best, cheapest option you can get. And arguably, it's the best option across the range for just general purpose computing tasks, and even some higher end stuff like doing video editing and stuff like that. So
look, MacBook Air or the base model MacBook Pro, sensational machines. And I'll put this out there because you told me about the battery life on the train on the way over. We played the original Spider-Man and the Avengers, the one, and up on full brightness, kids plugged in with their headphones on, and there was still 2/3 of a battery left. And that's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. The MacBook Pro, the base model is good for those things. The thing that it has over the Air is extra, like you get a few more hours out of it.
Yeah.
Display brightness is brighter. You get studio mics. So a reason why I got the Pro over the Air is that when we do the podcast, I don't have to actually use this thing. I can actually use that, even though podcasters would probably be upset with me for doing that.
Well, that's true. Now we did speak about, I think, MacBook Air versus MacBook Pro. I can't remember whether it was personally or on air, but I'd go the MacBook Pro every time.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the 12 and the 13 iPhone.
Yeah.
You get you get a lot more for a little bit more money.
Yeah.
In the MacBook Pro. So every time.
Absolutely.
And it's restored my faith in Apple.
Absolutely. Now, that's not to say that the other options there aren't great. Hardly anyone's going to need a Mac Pro, and you wouldn't get it now because it's got the Intel chips in it. The Mac Mini might be an option if you've got old peripherals like an old monitor, an old keyboard, and you don't want to buy the rest of it and you're not mobile. That might be a good option, but again, don't buy the Intel version.
Just one thing on that, the MacBook Pro only supports one external monitor. The Mini does multiple monitors.
Yeah,
so if you really want to sit down at a desk most of the time, the Mini would probably be a better option.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
With a couple of monitors, that is. Otherwise, go the MacBook Pro.
Absolutely. The 27-inch iMac, again, I wouldn't get unless you've got some burning compatibility issue with, ARM, with the Apple Silicon, with whatever software you're running, but I definitely wouldn't get that. The 24-inch iMac, I do like looking at it, but I don't know. We just explained why you should get the MacBook Pro or Air. So
I agree. I would easily say that MacBook Pro is probably the best personal computing experience I've had.
And the only other thing I was going to mention, and I'll just tap on it here in the MacBook Pro section, is obviously they made a splash with the 14-inch and 16-inch releases with the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips. As you can see there, I'm just scrolling through some of that there. Look, I may at some point consider going the 14-inch just from the form factor and the extra ports and all of that stuff. I find that kind of attractive. I'd absolutely
I reckon you will.
Probably. I'll wait for another generation to come out. But what I would probably say is that, like for me personally, I'd only go the base model because anything above that, you really need to justify what exactly your workflow is for it. You'd want to be doing 3D modeling. You'd want to be doing multiple streams of 8K. Yeah. You'd want to be doing something really, really serious to take advantage of it because, as you can see there, just look at those base model prices, and it can go up to, I think it can go up to about $6-7 grand, fully kitted out, which if not more. I think it's actually more than that in Australian dollars, actually.
Yeah,
so
it would be. I think, though, on the Max and the Pro, though, they do support more than one external monitor. So you're starting to get into very, very serious territory. Like you say, I don't know what anyone would be using them for at home.
Yeah.
And even in a work environment, you'd want to be doing some pretty serious CGI, like... 4-dimensional renders or something like that. They're working on the LHC.
Absolutely.
Or mining Bitcoin.
All right. Exactly. All right, I'll just jump over to the iPad quickly. I find this is actually a very similar sort of scenario to the Macs, actually. If you're not worried about it being flashy, the reality is for most general purpose use cases, the base iPad is actually probably the best. Price-wise, it's right there. You'd probably want to get the 120, the higher base storage option or whatever it is. But this one is probably the only issue is that it's got the old designs and it doesn't have the laminated screen, so it's not quite as flashy as the other options there. But for most people, that's probably more than enough. They probably won't care. I actually. In terms of the other consideration, the only other one that I would consider, which would be my personal choice, is always the iPad Pro 11. And the only reason I do that is that considering it's an all-screen device, you want the best screen. And that's the only one that's got the 120 hertz refresh rate on it for smoother scrolling and better overall presentation in terms of what you're seeing on the screen.
Wow.
Which is what we're using here, by the way. We're not using the current one. This is the 2020 version, but it's still the same idea.
Quite incredible. I think you're absolutely right about the iPad. And just as a bit of trivia, my iPad 3 is 11 years old now, and it's sort of now just starting to become OS obsolete.
Absolutely, they do have good longevity, a bit like the iPhones as well.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. There are a couple of other things. I just wanted to, as part of the main group, I wanted to touch on Apple Watch, and I only want to do this quickly because the reality is that I actually feel it's a superfluous device. Maybe one day it will, feature in the lineup for what I use, but the two main reasons that I refuse actually to get an Apple Watch is, one, I don't know what I would use it for. And the second one is, part of me, even though I enjoy the Apple products that I use and get a lot of functionality out of them, I do not want to buy the Apple Watch because I don't want to be 100% all in. And this, to me, when I see people walking around with these, just makes me think I don't want to be one of those people wearing one of these things.
I have to agree with you. I think that's probably just something I've noticed with the phone is that basically the phone is designed to suck you into the Apple world, and that's something I'm not that interested in, because these days I don't probably do enough stuff on my phone.
Yeah.
But the Apple Watch is just part of that. And while they're great watches, they're part of pulling you into that Apple ecosystem. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best experience unless you just want to live and breathe Apple.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like once you're getting, sorry people who, enjoy their Apple Watches. I'm sure you do.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's right. And I'm sure that there's a lot of, I'm sure they're actually really good at what they do in terms of the functionality and the hardware, etc. I just feel, for me personally, it's jumping the shark once you've bought one of these. And look, that's not to say that they won't create something that will be, an ability to build it in. I just feel like the Apple Watch has never really figured out a way to find a place in the lineup. But that's not to say they haven't, because they're selling a lot of them and making lots of money out of them.
And they're an attractive watch. But I will say this is, I've got a specialist watch, Chorus.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about that is it doesn't really belong to any ecosystem, but it does what I need it to do.
Yeah.
Whereas the Apple Watch, by definition, has to fit into the Apple ecosystem. And I think that's where, for some people maybe like us, it doesn't solve an issue. Whereas for a lot of people who are all in on Apple and are all in socials, it probably fits in nicely.
Yeah.
So we probably sit beyond that these days.
Mm.
But
Absolutely. Or maybe I've just got used to not wearing a watch at all. So there you go.
That's the best way to be.
Absolutely. All right, I'm just going to flick through a couple of the last ones here. So the Apple TV, I actually would recommend this to anyone. It's generally considered overpriced, but when I consider that I only watch my all TV through that box, I don't actually watch. I don't really watch free-to-air TV anymore. I generally find free-to-air TV unwatchable these days. I stream everything off the internet, YouTube, any of the streaming services, all that sort of stuff, and it's perfect for that. Yeah, you can get the Chromecast and
which I've got two I've got Chromecast 1 and Chromecast 3,
and perfectly fine because they do a great job as well. So I'm not saying not to get those; they're at a better price point as well. This is actually pretty expensive for what it does. However, I would say that for the amount of time that it's being used, I'm getting my money's worth out of it because you can have it on in the background or whatever it is that you're doing.
Absolutely, and I totally agree, and it certainly would probably integrate very well with your Apple products. The only thing I'll say about the Chromecast is, along with the search engine, the Chromecast is the other thing that Google succeeded at.
Absolutely.
Everything else might have been a failure.
Absolutely. The Airpods, again, I'd stay away from the Max because that's just ridiculously expensive. You can get a pair of Sony XM4s for half the price, or more than half the price, actually,
wow.
And get roughly 95% of what you get there, other than working with the ecosystem and all that stuff. The Airpods Pro is actually what I'd recommend over all of those. Yes, they're expensive, but you're getting a level of functionality with those that you can't beat with the other models. Noise cancellation.
True.
Transparency mode, and even just the overall sound quality.
Look, the only thing I'd add to that is they don't appear in the Apple Store under Apple, but the Beats are very good. Yes. Designed by Dr. Dre and owned by Apple anyway.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not in there because they compete. The products are slightly different to the Pods because they are more about sound, but they integrate with Apple just as easily and probably worth a look, even though they're not there in the store.
Absolutely. The HomePod Mini, well, that's just, it's cute. I actually heard one in a store once. It actually throws out sound at a much bassier and clearer rate than I actually expected, given it's only about that big. I don't have any need for one, but it's decently priced for a smart speaker. I might get one day. I don't know. It's not something that I necessarily have any use for. And iPods are still there, Steve. I don't think anyone should buy an iPod at this point.
Why? Why would anyone buy an iPod? Yes, I mean, for the kids, I don't know. People got so many leftover iPhones. Yeah. Just hand over the iPhone.
Or just like an old iPad would be better.
Well, like an iPad 3.
Or if you really wanted to splurge, just get that base model iPad that we were talking about earlier. $299 for a very old device. They haven't updated the chips in them for years and stuff like that. Why they're there, who knows? There might be some. I had heard that developers like to have a device that's like a cheap device to do testing on. Okay. Yeah, but still, I don't think that really follows anyway, because they could just use their old devices as well. But anyway, AirTags, I won't dwell on this for too much, only because I think I'd have no use for these whatsoever. But they have been in the news a lot because of privacy concerns and stalker issues and that sort of thing. But if you have a use for them, if you feel like you lose your keys a lot, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's just the sort of news stories they like to run. They don't seem to have any issue with everyone else tracking you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think that might be a good round out. I think we will revisit this later in the year just to see what's different. I'm actually actively considering what my overall sort of makeup of the products are. I definitely think I'm on my last. I've got a 27-inch iMac, but it's 4.5 years old, and it's still cruising along quite well. But I'm actually thinking my lineup might be all mobile, or the ability to be all mobile after that one sort of bit the dust kind of thing. Because I just don't see the point of getting I like desktop. I like the desktops, but I just don't don't know why you would get them now.
In the last couple of years with work from home, I've just moved to a single large monitor, and I've got a good docking station, cube, and my MacBook Pro clips into that, USB-C, no problems. So that's all you need.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are random thoughts about, we managed to get through the Apple Store. It's a lot more complicated these days back compared to yesteryear, but at least all what Steve Jobs wanted to do with the 4 quadrants.
Oh, that's right.
But I think, I'm sure you'll be able to find something there if you happen to be in for that. So thanks again, Steve. It's been good to have you over, and we can do this in person. And we've got all the ambience going on as well with a helicopter and everything.
Coming over. It's just coming to pick me up and whiz me off to somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And and thanks for visiting our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.